This is Behind the Mic with AudioFile magazine. I am Jo Reed. Alan Minskoff is piloting us this week, and we've had 2 novels thus far.
And we have one more.
Okay.
Again, we're traveling far and wide today. So this novel is called The Riveter, and it is about a Chinese Canadian logger who becomes a riveter during World War II. So this is historical fiction set in Canada and in the European theater. The protagonist is Josiah Chang, who is a logger from northern British Columbia who ends up in a shipyard and then joins, and not easily, has to go clear to Toronto because during this time they were not accepting Chinese Canadians, and yet, but he made his way and he went to Toronto, and whoever was making the decision said, "Okay, you're going," and he became a paratrooper. And he's a, this is one of those lovely kind of historical fictions where you're rooting for him, and he does really well.
It's interesting. I didn't think of Canada as discriminating against Chinese immigrants, but of course, why not? I mean, the United States had the Chinese Exclusion Act from 1882 till 1943, which for obvious reasons, they had to rescind it because China was our ally in that war.
And of course, the Canadians are just about to change their laws when this is written,
Yeah.
the period of time when it's written. Any rate, he goes to work at a shipyard in Vancouver, and the sound sample we'll listen to in a little bit is when women arrive at the shipyard to become workers as well. And that is initiating action because one of the women who comes to shipyard becomes the love of his life, and she is essential to the story. I have to say a couple of things. First, Feodor Chin is a good. I have reviewed other audiobooks that he's narrated, and he is a good narrator. He has a good pace. He is easy to listen to. He is able to describe the details of shipbuilding and the things that the protagonist does. And he also does a couple of accents. He does an English accent during the paratroopers training, and he does a Southern American's accent. But what he doesn't do, and this surprised me, is, I live in the West and I hear Canadian accents all the time. He does not do the Canadian accent, which we hear all the time in the American West.
That's interesting.
And I wonder why they made that decision.
Maybe they thought it would be too much of a cliche. I don't know. I mean, I have no idea. That is interesting, though, considering he does a Southern American accent.
And a Brit, or more than one Brit. So that did surprise me. It did not take away from, candidly, it didn't take away from the power of the love. This is a love story set in World War II, and that's a kind of a set piece, and really works. Because people are naturally so divided, and you're worrying about both. How much are they going to? Will they ever be able to get back together? What will happen in the interim? And all those things, and where you have far apart lovers. And they are lovers. He's a Chinese Canadian, and she's not. She's an English. Her Poppy, his love interest, is from a different background. So that in itself has adds some fascination.
And do we get much of the war itself? Do we follow both of them?
We follow him more closely because he's in the theater of operations, and you follow him during his training and the battle scenes. I will say that Jack Wang, the author, really worked hard getting the detail, and I have to give him credit for it. It's very detailed. The battle scenes are detailed. The locations are detailed. And this is all happening within, the most important moment in world history.
Well, why don't we hear a little bit of it and then talk a bit more?
You bet.
Okay. This is The Riveter by Jack Wang, read by Feodor Chin.
He craned for another look. That's when he saw not just flat caps and hard hats, but bandanas and headscarves. So not just new recruits, but women. Which made sense. More and more men were going off to fight. Even after sopping up all the men who had lain around during the Great Depression, and all the men who kept pouring out of the mountains and the prairies, the yard was still short. Workers had to come from somewhere.
I think it's so hard for us to realize in 2025 how novel it was to have women working in factories like that, like riveting factories.
Precisely, like building ships for going to war.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and I like his voice. It's interesting. He has a voice that sounds a bit like a newsreader, just in the quality of the voice itself, but there's something quite compelling about it. Yeah, I like listening to him.
I do too, and I think we did another one of his books that he narrated a
Yeah.
couple of years ago.
And I did one with Emily, part of the Drowning Empire series.
Yeah, I think he's a busy narrator, and he does good work. And I like the point you made about him sounding like a newsreader, because when you're doing the World War II stuff, the battle and the jumping out of an airplane, he is a paratrooper after all, and the sense of life and death and the behavior of people in war, he is a really good narrator for that because he's very precise and he gives it to you without too much inflection.
Okay. That is The Riveter by Jack Wang, read by Feodor Chin. Alan, thank you so much.
You're welcome. We're on to the world of nonfiction,
Okay, I'm ready for it, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.
and I look forward to it.
Don't forget to follow Behind the Mic wherever you get your podcasts and then leave us a rating because it helps people who love audiobooks to find us. I'm Jo Reed. I'll talk to you tomorrow.